The financial secretary further explains the rationale behind his latest government budget. The development secretary stresses delays in Khao Yi Chau artificial islands will not affect housing supply in the next decade. And in South Korea, senior doctors hold a rally in support of striking juniors. Hello and welcome to TVB News. Financial Secretary Paul Chan today said on a TVB program that authorities had introduced measures to help the middle class in the past few years. This after the finance chief delivered the government budget for the next financial year with reduced relief measures for the public. Mimo Singai reports.
With Hong Kong facing a financial deficit, the government is going to cut down relief measures in the new financial year. Meanwhile, some say the budget would do little to help the middle class. For instance, for salaries tax and tax under personal assessment, the current personal basic allowance is $132,000, which has remained unchanged for several years. Why didn't the government raise the limit of the allowance for individuals under the existing economic environment?
We did have introduced quite a number of initiatives to help the middle class. Say, for example, increasing the amount of home loan interest deductions. Say people putting additional contributions to MPF or buying a deferred annuity. And we did have raised the allowances deductions a couple of times. And this year, considering that last year the inflation was very moderate, and we are also facing pretty tough fiscal consideration. So we conclude that perhaps this year we put this on hold for the moment and review later on.
The financial secretary earlier mentioned the 2025 Khao Yi Chau artificial island reclamation project will be delayed for 2 to 3 years. Chan said the financial deficit is a contributing factor.
The various studies, the technical studies are being conducted. So after the conclusion of those studies, we will see are there any mitigating measures need to be done. If there is any, we will be able to do it. And at the same time, considering the financial position of the government in the coming years, we do need to think about the different financing options for the reclamation project. But we are very determined to push this ahead.
Chan and the authorities aim to control the public infrastructure expenditure at about $90 billion per year for the next 5 years. Many raised their concern over the amount of bonds that the government plans to issue this year, $120 billion worth of bond. On Facebook, former Financial Secretary John Tsang expressed his concern. He said the city has entered a structural deficit era. While it is a common policy for countries to issue debt to support government operations, Tsang said Hong Kong is an SAR and cannot be compared to a country. He pointed out a long-term bond issuance will bring major consequences to the city, such as affecting its credit rating. Tsang said the administration must reduce its expenditure to get out of the structural deficit. Chief Executive John Lee, meanwhile, uploaded peach blossom photos on Facebook. Lee described the blossoms as good signs and said the city's economy will advance further than before. Mums 9, TVB News.
Addressing the delayed development of the Khao Yi Chau artificial islands project, Secretary for Development Bernadette Lin emphasized it will not affect the city's housing supply in the next decade. But she added the delay will have a minor impact on the supply of developable sites. Timothy Lee tells us more.
The government has delayed its plan for land reclamation at Khao Yi Chau in 2025 owing to financial concerns. Secretary for Development Bernadette Lin said authorities are aiming to sort out their finances and are striving to commence the development project before the end of the term of this administration.
Lin
noted the delay will not affect the supply of both private and public housing in the next 10 years. But she added that pushing back the Khao Yi Chau project will have a minor effect on the city's supply of developable sites in the next decade, since the artificial islands there make up 400 of the 3,300 hectares of such land. Regarding the government's adjustments to the schedule of infrastructure development, the Secretary for Development said some projects, such as the Eastern Corridor Boardwalk, will be affected. She apologized, saying that the government will do its best to utilize available resources to move ahead with its infrastructural goals. Addressing concerns about a possible surge in housing prices after the government withdrew all property cooling measures, Lin stressed the positive aspects of a livelier housing market. She noted authorities will closely follow the market situation. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Secretary for Culture, Sports and Tourism Kevin Yeung said today authorities will focus more on the latest visitor figures to the city rather than looking at previous numbers. Speaking on a radio program, Yeung said the tourism sector has largely returned to pre-pandemic levels. However, the government will not focus on old visitor figures from now on because tourist travel habits have changed. Yeung explained that tourists do not always flock to landmarks and attractions. Instead, many tend to explore local areas such as Sham Shui Po. The annual session of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, or CPPCC, will open in Beijing on Monday and end on next Sunday. A press conference was held today before the official opening of the meeting. Spokesman Liu Jieyi said the advisory body will continue to provide suggestions regarding the issue of employment in the country. Meanwhile, Hong Kong delegates to the CPPCC and the National People's Congress, or NPC, headed to Beijing today for the annual two sessions meetings. Starry Lee, Hong Kong's sole delegate to the NPC, said she will suggest to the central government that the tax allowance for mainland tourists be increased from 5,000 yuan to 30,000. Lee said such a suggestion has received support from some NPC members. Thousands of senior doctors in South Korea held a mass rally in Seoul to express their support for striking juniors. They hope to gain more public support. 9,000 walkouts have caused delays in hospital services. Interns say a planned increase in medical school admissions will devalue their worth and lower standards of care. The government says it is the only way to cope with a shortage of professionals and an aging population. These consultants, who are still working, held up banners claiming lawmakers are not engaging in conversation. The government appears to have done its talking, saying it will suspend the medical licenses of those defying a return to work order from Monday. U.S. officials say Israel has agreed to the framework of a proposed Gaza ceasefire and hostage release deal, and it is now up to Hamas to agree. Talks were to resume in Cairo, led by mediators Egypt, Qatar, and the U.S., with officials hoping to secure a deal before the start of the Muslim fasting month of Ramadan in about a week's time. Meanwhile, agencies will welcome a deal that allows more aid to reach Palestinians who are on the verge of a famine, saying airdrops are not enough. Nasvi Karim has more.
Parachutes carrying humanitarian aid are seen falling into the horizon in southern Gaza. It's part of an international effort to deliver much-needed aid to a desperate population, almost 600,000 of whom are on the brink of famine. The United States is the latest country to join the airdrops, a day after 115 Palestinians were killed, many by Israeli troops, as they tried to converge on aid trucks in northern Gaza. Crew on a C-130J transport plane dropped 38,000 food parcels to citizens below. U.S. officials say civilians were observed picking up the aid pallets and distributing among themselves. However, a Red Cross official says the airdrops, while welcome, will do little to avert a catastrophe until aid trucks are allowed in Gaza unimpeded and protected from the plundering of criminal gangs.
Of course, we welcome any increase to the flow of assistance that's coming into the Gaza Strip, because we see how desperately civilians need that aid in order to survive, quite literally. At the same time, airdrops are really only ever used as an absolute last resort. They're logistically very complicated and very expensive as well.
Officials are hoping ongoing ceasefire talks will allow for a lengthy pause in the fighting and a significant increase in the number of aid trucks entering Gaza. Israel and Hamas representatives were set to arrive in Cairo on Sunday for talks with Egypt, Qatar and the U.S. negotiators. Hopes have risen for an agreement. US officials say a straightforward deal is on the table and it only requires the green light from Hamas. The Palestinian group is demanding that any temporary ceasefire paves the way for a permanent one, and they have been told that this can be discussed during phases 2 and 3 of any deal. Meanwhile, Gaza officials say 25 people have been killed in the southern district of Rafah, in which around 1.5 million Palestinians are sheltering. 11 were killed in an airstrike that hit tents near a hospital. Another 14 from one family died when a house was hit. Nazri Karim, TVB News.
Still ahead, a story about the new Raven Master at the Tower of London. 5 cats given medical attention following a fire in Kwai Chung. And police get tough with unscrupulous cabbies. Welcome back to TVB News. It is said to be the most important job in England. You might think that would be the King or the Prime Minister, but legend says the person who looks after the ravens at the Tower of London has the fate of the kingdom in their hands. A new man has just taken up the role. David Garrett with more.
Meet the Raven Master. Michael Barney Chandler's new job is to look after the famous blackbirds at the Tower of London. The 56-year-old is a beefeater, hence the uniform. He's in charge of feeding and caring for the sacred ravens and making sure they stay at the tower. Otherwise, things could go badly wrong.
The legend of the ravens here at the tower states quite clearly if the ravens leave the tower, a disaster will befall the monarch and the kingdom will fall.
Barney is a former Royal Marine. All beefeaters are military veterans. Their costume dates back to the 16th century. In the 17th century, King Charles II was told of the prophecy and ordered that there must always be at least 6 ravens living at the tower at all times.
I take the responsibility very seriously, and now that I'm Raven Master, to have that extra responsibility on my shoulders, we don't know if it's true or not because we've never let the number drop below 6, and it's not going to happen while I'm here.
The Tower of London on the banks of the River Thames can claim to be one of the most storied buildings in the world. It was built by William the Conqueror after his Norman invasion of 1066. The tower's been a royal residence, famously a prison, even for some royals, a zoo and now a tourist attraction visited by 3 million each year. There are currently 7 ravens that call it home, 1 extra than the Charles II decree. They are, in no particular order, Jubilee, Harris, Georgie, Edgar, Branwyn, and the latest addition is Rex, named after the current monarch King Charles III. And let's not forget Poppy, Barney's particular favourite, who likes to feast on mouse, given half a chance. The bird's wings are clipped to stop them flying too far.
They're all totally different personality-wise. They're like us. They've got their own personalities. Some will play ball, but others won't. So you never know. It's just the unpredictability of them, which is also the interesting part of the job, or one of the interesting parts as well.
The Raven Master says he will treasure his job like the crown jewels inside. David Garrett, TVB News.
Donald Trump easily won the Republican caucuses in Michigan, continuing his march towards the party's nomination for this year's presidential election. He trounced main rival Nikki Haley with 98% of the support, having already beaten her handily in Missouri and Idaho. While the Michigan GOP has remained entrenched in division, chaos, and legal disputes, the convention in Grand Rapids showed that Trump remains the unifying force between the party's warring factions. Michigan Republicans were tasked with allocating 39 of the state's remaining presidential delegates. Trump handily won Michigan's February 27th Republican primary, receiving 68% of the vote to Haley's 27%. More than 1,600 party insiders took part in the caucus. Super Tuesday on March 5th will see primaries in 15 states and 1 territory, with Trump expected to dominate again. Fires broke out today in Kwai Chung and Ngau Tau Kok. In the Kwai Chung fire, 5 cats were given medical attention after inhaling smoke. Some of the animals had to wear breathing apparatuses after being rescued. Fire services personnel administered first aid to the felines. Staff of the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals later took them away for further treatment. Authorities received reports of a fire at around 1 p.m. at Tak Chung Building on Kwai Chung Road. Firefighters put out the blaze in around half an hour. Some 50 local residents left on their own. Preliminary investigations indicate the fire started at a range hood. Meanwhile, another fire broke out at around 11 a.m. in an apartment unit at Upper Ngau Tau Kok Estate. Around 80 residents were evacuated and no injuries were reported. The blaze was put out by firefighters. They believe the fire was caused by burning incense sticks that ignited nearby items. Over the last 4 days, police engaged in an operation tackling the problem of taxis overcharging passengers, as well as engaging in other malpractices in Lang Kwai Fong and the area around the Peak Tram. 6 taxi drivers were served summonses on suspicion of refusing passengers and not indicating their taxi meter. 4 other drivers were issued defective vehicle reports. Police also suspect another taxi of having structural defects and is suspected of violating road traffic regulations. The taxi is currently under inspection at a police vehicle pound. Authorities also served 10 fixed penalty notices to taxi drivers suspected of dropping off their passengers at restricted areas. China and Thailand have recently implemented mutual visa exemption measures, further strengthening the bilateral relationship through tourism. Besides being a tropical paradise, many mainland tourists recently joined the trend of visiting the Southeast Asian nation to take photos of themselves wearing Thai school uniforms. But while the act is considered illegal in the country, some local uniform shops came up with some ingenious solutions. Timothy Lee reports.
High school dramas have long been popular with audiences across Asia, and Thailand is the latest to steal the spotlight. School uniforms have now become a fashion symbol of the nation. But it's not local students who came to buy uniforms in this store, but rather Chinese tourists. This tourist from Hebei province was among many mainland visitors who are fans of Thai high school dramas. She said wearing these uniforms make her feel like she's in school again and allows her to experience her childhood memories. While this visitor from Chengdu noted the uniforms make her feel young and gives her the opportunity to better integrate into the local culture. Each uniform costs around 700 Thai baht, that's around 150 Hong Kong dollars. Many of these shops even help customers iron their new clothes immediately. Some shop owners said tourists make up as much as 80% of their customers, primarily coming from China, Malaysia, and Singapore. Despite the rising popularity of dressing up as students, the act of non-students wearing uniforms is considered illegal under Thai law. Those found violating the law could be fined 1,000 baht, or around 200 Hong Kong dollars. To circumvent these restrictions, some shops will help customers sew their names or eliminate the names of schools on their uniforms. With many uniform-wearing tourists visiting photo studios to take a snap of their childhood memory, some studio shopkeepers said they hope the trend will continue to spread Thailand's soft power.
After they are wearing, it means they want to, they are open the world. They want to be and learn more Thai culture.
Timothy Lee, TVB News.
That's the news. Bye for now.